Hi and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to talk about Anna Nicole Smith and how her rise to fame led to the tragic events of today's case. The trigger warnings for today are drug abuse and self-image issues. So without any further ado, let's get on to the video. Anna Nicole Smith, who was actually named Vicky Lynn Hogan, was born on the 28th of November in 1967 in Houston, Texas, to her mother, Virgie Mae Hogan. Now, Virgie fell pregnant when she was only 16 years old with her boyfriend at the time. The two had gotten married, but the marriage only lasted for about a year and a half before the couple decided to eventually break up. So Virgie became a single mom when Anna was only 3 months old. And whilst doing my research, I did came across a rumor regarding Vicky's father. Apparently he was an assaulter and just in general not the best influence, so he kind of just disappeared from their life from now on. Virgie later would become a police officer in their hometown, and eventually she would also remarry her second husband called Donald, who she had 4 more children with, and Donald actually even adopted Vicky. And Virgie would later say that Vicky struggled a lot adapting to her new surroundings. Since she was an only child for 5 years, she did struggle not having all the attention on her, but despite that the family life was pretty normal. And once Vicky entered into her teenage years, she started to sneak out and, according to her family, became boy crazy. When Vicky turned 15 years old, she was sent to Mahia in Texas to live with her aunt. So now she lives with her aunt and her aunt's daughter, so basically her cousin. And this aunt of hers was more of a friend for Vicky than she was a parental role. And whilst in 9th grade, Vicky was bullied a lot for her appearance. She was pretty tall and the other classmates made fun and picked on her a lot, to the point where Vicky started to struggle and develop anorexia. And unfortunately, this would be something that she would struggle for the rest of her life. Vicky was also expelled from school, I believe for fighting with another classmate. She would eventually go back before dropping out altogether from high school. She was trying to figure out who she was and where she wanted to go in life. Pretty much reinvent herself to the point where she would create different types of stories that she would tell different people. Vicky would tell some of her friends that she grew up poor and had to steal toilet paper and that she was raised on food stamps. One story that she told was that her aunt was actually her real mom. So over time she created many different stories about herself and her upbringing. But Virgie, who by the way was indeed Vicky's real mom, did say that Vicky didn't grow up poor and she didn't have to steal toilet paper. And she also asked Vicky why are you telling those stories? Why are you making things up? To which Vicky replied that all famous people have cool stories, so she needs them too. And since she was out of school, Vicky decided to look for a job, and she found herself working at a restaurant called Crispy's, where she ended up meeting her first husband called Billy, who was 1 year younger than her. The couple got married pretty quickly when Vicky was only 17 years old and Billy was 16, and soon after the wedding, Vicky had fallen pregnant and gave birth to her first son, who she named Daniel. But the relationship between Vicky and Billy unfortunately didn't last much longer, and the couple divorced when Vicky was 19 years old and moved back to her mom with her son. Back in Houston, she worked at a Red Lobster, Walmart, and a couple of more places, but Vicky just felt like she wasn't making enough money for her family. And one night, Vicky happens to see one of those big light signs with girls in bikinis, which read Gentlemen's Club. And Vicky said that once she entered the club, she was surprised because she didn't think that it was a strip club. But nonetheless, she started working as a waitress, but after a while watching the other girls dancing and just seeing how much more money they made, she talked to the manager of the club and started to dance just a few nights after. Now, after a while of her dancing, Vicky's mom, who again was working as a police officer, came into the strip club where her daughter worked and told the manager like, listen, you either get my daughter off the stage or I'll come by here every night from now on. So the manager actually did get her off stage, but her mom's attempt to get Vicky to stop didn't work because she was back the next day doing her thing. And her popularity just kept on rising to the point where Vicky was making very good money. Vicky also wanted to pursue a career as a model, and her role model being Marilyn Monroe, Vicky tried to do everything that Marilyn did. So she kept applying to different agencies, but they just kept declining her, pretty much with every excuse that you can possibly imagine. One told her that she needed to lose a few points, the other one would tell her that her nose isn't quite right. So basically, with her appearance being just picked apart, Vicky started to think that in order to get her breakthrough, she would need bigger breasts. So Vicky saves up her money and goes to get plastic surgery. But unfortunately, there were a lot of complications involved. Vicky suffered with rupting, a lot of back pain, and because she was in so much pain, that's when Vicky would start to self-medicate in order to cope with the constant pain. In 1991, Vicky met a quite older man by the name of James Howard Marshall one night whilst doing her shift at the club. James was born on the 24th of January in 1905, and he was 68 years old in a wheelchair when he took note of Vicky. And another thing I need to mention is that James was a billionaire. So he comes in and Vicky goes over to him, they start to talk, she starts to dance for him, and they spend the whole night together. Vicky said that although James was quite a bit older than her, that he was funny and very smart, so both of them actually took interest in each other. Now, as for James, he was already married twice. His first marriage lasted for 30 years, and his second marriage, which I believe lasted also about 30 years, his second wife ended up passing away due to Alzheimer's. When his second wife started to feel the effects of her Alzheimer's, James did start to date a stripper, and from what I could find out, he was with this other woman for 10 years. James and the side woman were never getting that close, if you know what I mean. It seems like James just wanted company and just a nice time without the sex, because technically he is still married. So during those 10 years, he spent approximately millions on the second woman. He would buy her diamonds, expensive trips, even Rolls-Royce. His love language was definitely giving gifts and spending money on the people he cared about. Unfortunately though, James would have another setback in life, as his, I guess you can say, girlfriend passed away whilst in surgery to get a facelift. So James lost 2 women in a very short time, and he just felt so lonely at the time. But once he met Vicky, it all changed because James fell in love with her. And just one date later, Vicky would quit her job. James asked Vicky if she would start taking care of him, which she agreed to, and James quickly started to basically give her an allowance. Now, another thing that I need to mention is that James actually had 2 adult sons, and as you can imagine, they were not happy whatsoever that their father was spending so much money on Vicky. They had the impression that she was only after his money, when it was actually James who made the first move. And within weeks of them dating, James actually proposes to Vicky, to which she says no at first. But nonetheless, James was set to make her his wife, and he kept on lavishing her in gifts. He even bought her a 15-acre ranch with a big house and even some horses on the ranch. And James not only made sure that Vicky had everything that she wanted, but he also made sure that her son had everything that he needed. Knowing just how much her son meant to Vicky, he made sure to also take care of him. So now that Vicky wasn't dancing anymore and was financially secure thanks to James, she still wanted to pursue her dreams to make something out of her life. And one day a friend of hers came to visit and he brought her a Playboy magazine where they were actually looking for new talent. A lot of people said that she looked like Marilyn Monroe, and so she thought, why not at least give it a try? So she went to the photographer and got 4 Polaroid pictures taken of herself in different poses. In 1992, Vicky was doing her first shoot, where she even was on the cover of the magazine. And from that point on, her life started to change. In 1993, she met a man by the name of Paul Marcino. Paul was an executive of Guess Jeans, and once he came across her photo shoot for Playboy, he called her up offering her a job to work for Guess. It is also Paul who talked Vicky into changing her name to Anna Nicole Smith. Vicky agreed, and once she started to model for Guess, she became known internationally. She was also modeling for many different brands, and billboards with her faces were everywhere. Her popularity quickly started to rise, and Vicky took her chances and went into Hollywood, where she was getting smaller roles, and by this time she was living her dream. The high unfortunately didn't last all that long because Vicky was still in constant pain. Her back was hurting her from her breast surgery and all the complications. And she also said that she suffered from terrible migraines. And Vicky was taking a lot of medication. She had pills for her anxiety, insomnia, and a couple more just to get through the day. With all the fame and money, Vicky was happy that she had accomplished her goals. But deep down, she still felt so lonely because she just didn't feel loved. Vicky just felt like these 2 different personalities. The one where the cameras were on her and her true self when she was at her home alone. So she definitely struggled maintaining her alter ego, and in 1994 Vicky was found unconscious in a Beverly Hills hotel because she overdosed on her medications. Now Vicky did say in an interview that she didn't OD, but she was definitely unresponsive and she was found and was immediately taken to the ER where she was treated. But because of that incident, Vicky started having a hard time getting her booking gigs, and the tabloids just kept on talking about her OD. So she kind of took a break and went home to James, who was still persistent to marry her. And eventually Vicky says yes. In 1994, the couple got married, and James by that time is clearly so much older than Vicky, and his health isn't the best either. In fact, he couldn't even get out of his wheelchair at his wedding. Vicky did try to lift him up, but eventually she just kneeled down as they exchanged their vows. So they are now married and by the looks of it pretty happy. But in 1995, James' health started to decline even more. He had some sort of an infection and ended up in a hospital permanently. Vicky would visit him regularly. She would wear bikinis and cuddle up with her husband in his bed. Vicky just tried her best to cheer James up whilst he was in the hospital, but unfortunately James wouldn't recover. Another important detail is that just a few weeks after the marriage, James' son, who's called Pierce, talked his father into signing the power of attorney over to him. And once James is in the hospital, Pierce stops all of Vicky's allowance. He also stops her bills. Basically, everything that James did for her was now immediately being stopped. Now, I don't know how Vicky was handling her finances, because by that time she was working, modeling, acting in a few different movies or whatever. But she did say that once Pierce stopped everything, that she didn't have any money to pay her bills. Pierce even had armed bodyguards in the hospital room with James, and when Vicky would come to visit her husband, she was only allowed in 30 minutes per day. And James wasn't really quite in a good condition mentally. He probably didn't understand what was happening, so he would reach out for Vicky, wanting her to stay with him, but bodyguards wouldn't allow it and they would throw her out of his room. On the 4th of August in 1995, James Marshall unfortunately passed away, and when he died, a huge fight broke out between Vicky and Pierce, who was also in his 60s, mind you, over the body of James. James' body was cremated and his ashes were divided. His two sons received a part and a part went to Vicky. But the fight wasn't over there because now there was another fight over his $1.6 billion estate. See, James never took Vicky into his will. That was the argument that his sons were making. And Vicky was arguing, saying that she was his wife. So technically she didn't need to necessarily be put into his will. I'm not sure how the legal stuff works regarding last wills and stuff, but anyway, they went to court and the court battles would last for several years. So now that Vicky is on her own, still in a lot of pain and different medications, she decided that she wants to pursue her acting career. And that's when she would meet a man by the name of Howard Key Stern. Howard was born the 29th of November in 1968. And when he met Vicky, it was because she was in need of a lawyer. And he would be by her side until her very last day from now on. Rumors had now also started to spread about Vicky's medication problems again, because she would start to sweat and shake uncontrollably. And she said that it was from her lupus, but Howard later said that Vicky didn't have lupus. So it is only up to speculate if her issues maybe came from all the medication that she was on or not. And remember, Vicky started taking her pills when she was in her 20s, basically right after her breast surgery. And Vicky would keep on taking pills daily for over 20 years. But nonetheless, her career just kept on rising. She was making some good money. But Vicky's family, however, definitely had different opinions on her. The ones that were pretty close to her would say that Vicky just loved Christmas and visiting her family, spending time with them, spoiling them with big gifts, but that her family would just come around for the gifts and then leave again, not giving her the quality time that she was looking for. Now, the other side of her family said that she didn't give them as much as some might say. They said that Vicky would come around here and there and bring a little something, but that she in general was just wrapped up in her own little world. At one point, Vicky started to isolate herself more and more from her family. With everything that went on in her life, from losing her husband to having constant court battle over James' estate, being in pain and whatever issue she also might have health-wise, it started to become too much for Vicky and she slowly started to become very depressed. Vicky was also always in a relationship. It didn't matter if it was man or woman, if the person gave Vicky the attention that she wanted and needed, she would take it. The tabloids would also give her a hard time because Vicky over time had gained up to 70 pounds. Paparazzis were chasing her just so they could sell a picture of her with the weight that she had put on. So, because the press was making such a fuss about a woman gaining weight, people were also starting to talk, and this took a huge effect on Vicky's mental health. But Howard was still there for her. Anywhere that she went, he was there as well. Howard even moved in with her, and besides Howard, Vicky had an assistant named Kimmy, and she also had a bodyguard at her house. In 2000, a judge in California ruled that Vicky should get half of the estate. So she got $486 million worth of the estate. However, she still had to go to Texas the next year to close it out with another judge. And when she went to Texas, this judge said that Vicky wasn't getting anything. And once this was final, not only was she ripped away from the money that she'd already had in her hands, but the tabloids again were ripping her to shreds, saying that she was just a gold digger, that she married James solely for his money. And not only were the tabloids behind her, but Pierce as well. He dug up her past so deep and brought everything to court that he could possibly find out, just to make sure that Vicky wouldn't get anything. Vicky's family also later said that Howard was very possessive over Vicky, that he didn't want her to talk to anyone and almost manipulated Vicky into believing that no one was looking out for her besides him. Friends and family also said that when Vicky would call them, it was usually in the middle of the night and that they could tell just by how she was talking that she almost had to hide in order to have this conversation. In 2002, Vicky got some good news as the TV network E approached her about doing a reality show, showing people her life, and the show was going to be called the Anna Nicole Smith Show. She agreed and had 3 seasons before it ended, and many speculate that it ended because Vicky was on so much medication that everyone started to notice it, not only on her show but also in interviews and her appearances. Vicky looked drowsy, she would slur her words and just looked confused, like she didn't really comprehend what was happening. In 2003, Vicky got another huge breakthrough working with a company called Trim Spa, where she became the spokeswoman for them, and she lost about 70 pounds, so everyone was just curious about how she did that. In 2004, Vicky would meet a man called Larry Burkhead at the Kentucky Derby. Larry was hired as a photographer there, and once Vicky saw him, she was her funny, flirty self. She kissed him the day that she met him, and she fell in love with him. And the feeling was mutual because Larry packed up his things and moved in with her immediately and also started traveling with her. But the happiness unfortunately didn't last very long because soon after moving in with Vicky, Larry and Howard started to butt head a lot. Larry even told Vicky that he thinks that Howard is in love with her, but she just denied it as did Howard. But people who were close to Vicky and Howard would later say that they strongly believed that he was indeed in love with her. In 2005, Vicky fell pregnant and she tells the news to Larry. The couple is happy and excited to welcome their daughter to the world, and Vicky also had always wished for a little girl, so she was more than just thrilled. But just as excited as Vicky was, she quickly became distant to Larry because someone, apparently Howard, was starting to tell Vicky that she was now trapped and that Larry was just with her for money and that he didn't actually love her. So with that now on her mind, Vicky started to pull away from Larry and even told him that he wasn't the father of her child. And so Vicky leaves Larry and takes off with Howard. Another thing that Vicky didn't like was that Larry didn't like or support Vicky in her pill taking. He did say himself that he never saw her take anything illegal, but that she was clearly taking way too many pills. Vicky and Larry would break up, and Vicky, with her assistant Kimmy, her bodyguards, and Howard of course, went to the Bahamas, where Vicky got a nice place for them to stay, and she now started to live there. Daniel, Vicky's son, lived in LA with some friends, because even Vicky's son couldn't stand Howard. So he's living in California while Vicky's living at the Bahamas. And it is there when she went into labor. And on the 7th of September in 2005, Vicky welcomes her baby daughter Danielle to the world. During the birth, Howard, of course, was by her side and even videotaped the birth of Danielle, which was sold to E before Vicky was even out of the hospital. 2 days after giving birth, Daniel flies to the Bahamas to meet his sister, and Vicky was just so happy to have her son with her. On the 9th of September, Vicky was in her hospital room recovering from her C-section, and her son and Howard are with her, providing her company, and after a while Daniel falls asleep in a chair next to his mother. Around 6:30 a.m. a nurse came into the room and saw Daniel holding his sister. At 9:30 a.m., Vicky wakes up and reaches over to her son to wake him up, but Daniel was just kind of slacked over and wouldn't wake up. Vicky now starts to panic and she goes to touch him. She said that he was already ice cold. The doctors and nurses immediately rushed in, but unfortunately it was too late. Daniel Hogan passed away by the age of 20. He passed away due to an OD on a medication called methadone, for which he didn't have a prescription. However, Vicky did. Now, it is unclear whether Daniel just took the medication without Vicky's knowledge, or if she maybe even gave it to him. Vicky just couldn't cope with the death of her son, so she actually had to be sedated and brought back home. And at his funeral, Vicky requested to see her son a final time. And once the casket was open, Vicky just had a breakdown. She jumped onto the casket, shaking her son, begging him to wake up. Vicky again had to be sedated. So, on top of Vicky losing her son, the media started to speculate on who the father of her daughter was. She did tell Larry in person that it was indeed his child, but Vicky would never speak openly about who the father was. And before you know it, Howard is on CNN giving an interview saying that him and Vicky had been having this secret relationship for years and that he was the father of Vicky's daughter. And with this whole scandal now going around, Vicky is still living at the Bahamas and actually flies her friend out to see her. And this friend just happens to be a psychiatrist who is allowed to write prescription drugs. So now Vicky is her own personal doctor with her. And about a month after her son passed away, she's laying at the pool when her bodyguard heard a splash. And then Howard as she started screaming. So both men jumped into the pool and got her out and had to perform CPR on her. After a while, Vicky decides that she wants to buy a yacht. And the one that she wants to buy is in Florida. And you can actually drive with a boat from Florida to the Bahamas in a couple of hours. So Vicky packs up and goes to Fort Lauderdale with all of her crew. But she does leave her daughter with some friends on the Bahamas since her daughter is only about 1 month old at the time. But before Vicky leaves, she gets an HGH shot in her left butt cheek. Now, the shot that she got is a human growth hormone. She got it apparently to lose some weight, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't human growth hormones for building up muscles instead of losing weight? I mean, I could be wrong. But either way, she got the HGH shot and she also got a B12 shot combined. Once on the plane, Vicky starts to say that her butt cheek is really hurting her. And she also starts to sweat and shake uncontrollably. They get to Fort Lauderdale and that night she got a fever which spiked up to 105 degrees. Her friends noticed how high her temperature is and told her, like, you need to go to the hospital, but Vicky doesn't want to go. She keeps on refusing and therefore they put her into an ice bath. They managed to sink her fever down to 97 degrees and they managed to help her somewhat, at least with a fever, because no one knows what actually caused the temperature to be that high. And because Vicky keeps on refusing to go to the hospital, she is laid back into bed. The next day, Vicky wakes up and the people who were with her at the time said that Vicky, ever since arriving in Florida, didn't go to the bathroom once. And her fever is still there and up to 100 degrees. So again, she was asked to go to the hospital, but because Vicky was just being bashed and ripped apart by the tabloids, she didn't want to hear any of it. The next day, I believe the bodyguard's wife walked in around 1 p.m. and saw Vicky just slumped over. Her mouth was open, but she wasn't breathing. So now everyone started to panic. They lay her on the ground and start performing CPR. Again, apparently they did CPR on Vicky for a good 15 minutes. And after realizing that that wasn't working, that's when 911 was called. The paramedics came and rushed her to the hospital, where only 6 minutes after her arrival, Vicky Hogan was pronounced dead due to an overdose. There were 11 medications found in her system, to which 8 of them were prescribed to Howard and not Vicky. The psychiatrist was arrested on 8 felony charges, but as far as I'm aware, no punishment was given. And regarding Vicky's daughter, Danielle Lynn, she was supposed to be raised by Howard. Larry actually had to go to the Bahamas and fight because Howard was actually listed on the birth certificate. So Larry had to do paternity test and whatnot, but in the end it was discovered that Larry was indeed the father of Danielin. So he got the custody and was able to raise his daughter. So yeah, that's it for today's case. Not the typical case that I usually cover on here, but it is still a very interesting case to me because I personally think that so much could have been prevented. But yeah, as always, please let me know your thoughts and case suggestions in the comments down below, and I'll see you all in my next video. Take care, bye!